Soft whistles danced across the treetops as dusk tiptoed over the hills. The wind was gentle, but strange tonight, fluttering like invisible wings in a hurry, not knowing quite where to go. Above the forest, where the sky usually stretched like a deep, unbroken blanket of blue, something shimmered, not stars, not yet, not clouds either. It was something missing. One by one, pinpricks of emptiness appeared, as though a giant had poked tiny fingers through the sky itself. The colors around the holes flickered, and the birds paused in their flight as if startled by something they couldn't see. Even the squirrels, halfway through their leaps, froze for a breath. In the tallest pine, a small shape stirred. Curled in a nest of moss and feathered leaves was a girl with hair, the color of wildfire, and eyes like cracked honey. Her name was Nilo, and she was not supposed to be there, not at this hour, not in that tree, and certainly not with a pocket full of moonberries that glowed faintly, even now. The sky trembled once, very softly. Not like thunder, but like a sigh. The holes in the sky widened. Not torn, not broken, but opened as if they were never meant to be sealed shut. Nilo blinked up at them, wide-eyed. She did not run. She did not hide. Instead, she listened. There it was again, a hum. Low and secret, like something calling her name without using any words at all. Far below, in the roots of the forest, something stirred in answer, something that remembered when the sky was whole. Long ago, before Nilo was born, the sky had been sealed, stitched shut by the ancients with silver threads spun from forgotten songs. No creature remembered exactly why, only that it had to stay whole. But the sky had never agreed, and tonight it had started to undo the stitches. Nilo slid down from the pine tree, her feet brushing the bark like whispers. She landed softly on the moss below, her satchel bouncing gently against her side. The moonberries inside shimmered with pale blue light, pulsing in rhythm with the hum above. She looked up once more, squinting at the sky holes. They weren't black. They weren't dark at all. Instead, they looked like doorways into somewhere else, glowing with soft colors that shifted like dreams. She didn't know why, but something inside her knew this wasn't a mistake. The holes hadn't come to hurt. They had come because they had to. Behind her, the leaves rustled in an odd way, like they were being tugged from underneath. Nilo turned and spotted him, Fen. He was smaller than her, always with twigs in his curls and that look of too many questions in his eyes. He wasn't supposed to be out either, but there he stood with his arms crossed, watching the sky as if he expected it to answer him. They didn't speak. They never did. Not because they couldn't, but because it wasn't needed. Fen tilted his head toward the forest's edge, then nodded. Nilo understood. She followed. Through ferns and over fallen logs they moved, swift and silent. The hum in the sky grew clearer the deeper they went, like music underwater. Soon, the forest changed. The trees grew closer, their trunks twisted like ropes, their leaves heavy with dew that shimmered in unnatural colors. This part of the woods was older. It was where the roots ran deepest and stories still lived in the soil. They reached the hollow tree just as the last thread in the sky snapped. It didn't make a sound, but Nilo felt it in her chest, like a string being plucked behind her ribs. She looked up. The holes were wider now, 3 of them, like windows to somewhere kind and waiting. Each one shaped differently. One was round and soft-edged, one sharp and oval, almost like an eye. The third was shaped like a tear. The hollow tree groaned as Fen placed a hand on its bark. The trunk opened slowly, revealing a narrow spiral staircase made of roots. It wasn't there yesterday, but that didn't surprise them. Things often changed in the ancient part of the forest. Inside, the air was warmer and smelled like old dreams and candle smoke. Along the walls grew tiny mushrooms that glowed with pale lavender light. At the bottom, a cavern opened huge and round, with water at its center as smooth as a mirror. Around the edges, wooden shelves curved upward, stacked with strange objects, broken teacups, feathers in jars, and a single shoe that pulsed with golden dust. Waiting beside the water was an old creature, bent and quiet, with skin like tree bark and eyes like moth wings. They had no name anymore, but the forest whispered about them as the keeper. The keeper raised one hand slowly and motioned for the children to approach. Nilo stepped forward first, the moonberries in her pouch glowing brighter with every breath. The keeper touched the pouch gently, then nodded once, deeply. Then came a sound, soft but clear, an exhale from the sky itself. Through the holes, something was falling. Not rain, not stars, but something else. Light. Golden flickering strands of light, like threads unspooling from a giant loom far above. They floated down lazily, brushing leaves and skin, filling the cavern with warmth and stillness. The keeper closed their eyes and began to hum. It was a different hum, deeper, older, layered with sadness and hope. The threads of light spun faster in response, gathering in the water, circling. Nilo and Fen watched as images formed on the surface. Memories. Maybe. A time when the sky had holes all the time. When the stars weren't just lights, but eyes, watching kindly. When the sky could breathe. Fen glanced at Nilo. He knew what she was thinking. What if the holes weren't dangerous? What if they were healing? Suddenly, the light shimmered fiercely, and a new image rose from the water, a shadow, not of a person, not quite, but something hunched and smoky, with fingers like broken branches. It stirred the light as if trying to grab it, but the strands slid away, too bright, too fast. The keeper's hum faltered. The cavern dimmed. The shadow turned toward the children. Nilo felt the cold. Before she saw it, an invisible wind slicing through the cavern. The shadow didn't want the sky to open. It wanted the stitches to stay closed, the stars hidden, the light forgotten. It had lived too long in the sealed world. It fed on the stillness. Fen reached into his pocket and pulled out something small, an acorn, smooth and golden. Nilo knew where it came from, the tree of first light. He had found it seasons ago, and they had agreed to save it for something important. He looked at Nilo. She nodded. Fen dropped the acorn into the water. Instantly, the light strands snapped to attention, spinning faster. The water hissed like rain on fire. The shadow screamed not with sound, but with a pulling feeling, like sadness trying to climb into their hearts. But it didn't work. The moonberries in Nilo's pouch burst with light. The acorn cracked open, and from it bloomed a single golden flower, floating on the water's surface. It pulsed once, twice, then sent a shockwave through the cavern. The shadow crumbled like ash in sunlight. The keeper exhaled, long and tired, and the hum returned softer now, like a lullaby. Above them, the sky holes pulsed gently. From each one came a different breeze, warm, cool, and sweet-smelling. They weren't just doorways, they were places for feelings. The round hole was for joy, the eye-shaped one for wonder. The tear was for sorrow, but not bad sorrow, the kind that heals. The sky had needed to breathe, and now it finally could. Nilo and Fen stood together as the cavern dimmed. The keeper motioned toward the surface. Their part was not done yet. They climbed back up the spiral of roots, past the mushrooms and the tree's heartbeat. Night had fully arrived, but the forest glowed with a soft, welcoming light. The holes in the sky were still there, but now, stars gathered gently around them like fireflies dancing with the wind. From the edge of the forest, animals watched. Owls blinked slowly. Deer stepped forward without fear. Even the trees seemed taller, reaching toward the sky as if trying to touch the holes. Nilo held out her hand. One golden strand of light floated down into her palm, warm as breath, soft as a wish. She smiled. The world was changing, and something deep inside her knew. This was only the beginning. The next morning, the village stirred uneasily. Clouds had not returned. The sun had not risen. Instead, the sky shimmered in soft twilight, and the holes remained open. The grown-ups spoke in hushed voices, glancing skyward with worry creased into their brows. Even the roosters forgot to crow. Something had shifted, and only the children knew why. Nilo and Fen stood at the border of the forest. The golden strand still curled like a thread around Nilo's fingers. It had followed her home, glowing faintly through the night, but now it flickered. Dim, almost afraid. The warmth from the sky had changed. What had begun as wonder now trembled with something else, like a storm hiding behind the wind. The holes pulsed uneasily, and far above, shadows moved where light should have danced. Something had come through. Not the shadow from the cavern, it had been a memory, a warning. This was different. This was real. The keeper had not emerged again. The hollow tree had sealed. The forest, once warm and secretive, stood quiet and watchful. Nilo's chest ached with knowing. The sky had opened, yes, but something had also awakened. Something sealed away when the stitches were first sewn. Something that fed on what the sky had been forced to forget. Without a word, Fen held out his palm. Nilo placed the thread of light into it, and together they turned back toward the woods. They needed to find the sky mirror. No one had seen the mirror in generations. It was said to be hidden deep beneath the heart of the forest, where trees grew in spirals and roots sang old lullabies. The mirror was the sky's twin, a pool of perfect stillness that reflected not what was above, but what should be. If the holes were unbalanced, if something had slipped through that didn't belong, it would show in the mirror. Their path darkened as they walked. The air grew heavy. The birds fell silent. The light from Nilo's pouch flickered and steadied, as if nervous but brave. Then they found the spiral trees. Twisted like dancers mid-turn, they curled around one another in patterns so precise they could only be grown by magic. And in the center of the spiral, beneath a dome of woven branches, lay the mirror. It was flat and silver, but not wet. It shone, but cast no light. It hummed, but made no sound. Fen stepped close. Nilo followed. In the mirror, the holes in the sky looked different. They were wider now, tugged open from the inside. Around their edges curled smoke. Shadows slithered in, not out. The holes were being used. Nilo's knees went weak. Something wasn't healing. Something was invading. A sudden gust of wind roared through the spiral trees. The leaves shivered. The mirror rippled. Then it rose. Not the mirror itself, but from it, a figure, tall and faceless, formed entirely of wind and ash. Its body curled like smoke, limbs stretching like fog. It was the one who had waited. It had no eyes, but it turned toward Nilo as though it could see straight through her. It had no mouth, but it spoke not in words, but in memories, cold ones, ones that didn't belong to her. Endless nights, silent stars, worlds sealed and sleeping. It had lived in the dark spaces between the stitches. It had waited for the seams to fail. And now, through the holes, it could spill into the sky and make the world silent again. It hated the light. Fen stepped forward, arms out, but the wind being pushed him back with a simple breath. He staggered and fell. Nilo's fingers clenched around the satchel of moonberries. She remembered the warmth of the light, the strands, the kindness in the holes. She remembered the song of the keeper, the mirror's truth, and she understood. The sky had not opened to let the darkness in. It had opened to let it out. This creature was trapped in the stitches. Now, it wanted to stay. Nilo ran, not away, but toward the center of the spiral, to the mirror's edge. The wind being surged behind her, furious now. Shadows clawed at her heels. But the light from her pouch blazed to life, brighter than ever before. She threw the satchel into the mirror. The moonberries burst across its surface in brilliant blue light. The wind being shrieked silently, staggering back as the mirror flared with power. From its depths rose images not of fear, but of joy. Laughter, morning dew, fireflies dancing on summer nights, music played on hollow logs, stars blinking awake for the first time. The creature screamed again, a storm of shadows wrapping the trees, trying to smother the light, but it was too late. From the sky, golden threads began to fall, again, dozens of them, hundreds. They streamed through the holes like rivers, wrapping around the wind being, not to destroy, but to carry. It thrashed and flailed, but the light was not cruel. It was memory. It was truth. It was healing. As the golden threads pulled it upward, the sky pulsed. The holes widened just for a moment, and then began to close. Not sealed by force, not stitched like scars, but gently, like wounds choosing to rest. Nilo fell to her knees, breathless. The mirror shimmered one last time, then faded into stillness. Fen limped to her side, dirt-streaked and wide-eyed. Above them, the sky was whole again. Not perfect, not empty, but whole. And when the first stars blinked open, they did so softly, as if thanking the children for remembering what grown-ups had long forgotten. The sky was never meant to be sealed forever. It was meant to feel, to breathe, to shine. And now it could again. The wind was soft again. It rustled gently through the spiral trees, carrying the smell of damp moss and something sweeter, something like hope. Above, the sky had quieted, its holes gently sealed, not by thread or force, but by golden light that still shimmered faintly around the stars. Each one glowed, not like a lamp, but like a secret finally told. Nilo and Fen sat together at the edge of the mirror, their knees scraped and their hearts full of things too big to speak. The mirror no longer shimmered or rippled. It lay still, like calm water after a storm. But something deep inside it had changed. The reflection was clearer now, softer. For a long time, they said nothing. Not because there were no words, but because silence, when kind, can speak louder than anything. Then Fen stood slowly and helped Nilo to her feet. The forest watched them go, leaves bowing gently in the breeze. As they left the spiral grove, small lights bloomed at the tips of branches, buds of golden flowers, like the one that had blossomed from the acorn. Wherever they stepped, the ground held their footprints just a little longer, as if the earth itself was remembering. Back in the village, the grown-ups gathered by the well, eyes still lifted to the sky, unsure whether to fear or marvel. The holes had vanished, but the sky looked different now. Deeper, somehow. Softer at the edges. Children pointed at stars that didn't blink the same way they used to. Birds sang melodies they hadn't sung before. When Nilo and Fen emerged from the forest, no one spoke. They didn't need to. The glow around them said enough, the dust in Nilo's hair, the streaks of gold across Fen's fingertips. Even the satchel, now empty, shimmered with the memory of moonberries. The village elder stepped forward, leaning heavily on his carved walking stick. His eyes, usually cloudy with age, widened just a little as he looked at the children. He bowed his head, not in question, but in gratitude. The village held a fire that night, not out of fear, but in celebration. Stories were told, none of them complete, but all of them meaningful. No one spoke of battles or monsters. They spoke of light returning, of a sky that could now feel, and of two children who walked into the woods and came back changed. Nilo sat near the fire with her legs folded beneath her, watching the sparks rise like tiny stars of their own. She felt no need to tell everything that had happened. Some stories, she understood now, were meant to be carried, not spoken, but she did reach into her pouch and pull out the smallest, softest glow, a tiny curl of light that had stayed behind. It floated gently in her palm, warm and steady. She let it go. It drifted upward, past the smoke, past the trees, and up into the sky, where a new star appeared beside the others. Not bright, not loud, just new. That night, as the village slept, the sky sang, not with music, but with color. Shades of gold and blue wove themselves across the horizon, like ribbons unfurling from a giant's hand. Even the moon looked softer, rounder, as though it had exhaled for the first time in years. In her dreams, Nilo returned to the hollow tree, where the keeper stood waiting. This time, they smiled. The keeper held out their hand, and from it grew another acorn, not golden this time, but silvery gray, like rain on stone. They placed it in Nilo's hand and closed her fingers around it. Not a gift, a promise. She woke with it still there. Morning came slowly. The sun rising not in a rush, but with patience, as though it too was still healing. The sky no longer stretched like a perfect canvas. Instead, it wore faint swirls and soft patterns, gentle signs that the stitches were gone, but the story remained. Fen joined her at the edge of the village, holding a long stick he'd carved into a flute. He didn't play it yet. He just held it, feeling its weight and its silence. The two of them looked up together. The holes had closed, yes, but not all the way. In the far reaches of the morning sky, if one looked just right, they could still see faint glimmers, tiny places where the sky breathed in and out. Not broken, not wrong, just open. That was the truth of it all. The sky was never meant to be perfect. It was meant to feel. And sometimes, feeling meant cracking open. Sometimes, healing meant letting light in. The villagers began to notice small changes in the days that followed. Rain fell more gently. Winds carried songs none of them remembered learning. Trees bloomed in strange seasons. Stars appeared in places where no one had ever seen stars before. No one spoke of sealing the sky again, not even the oldest among them. They had remembered something the world had long forgotten. When you close up hurt too tightly, it can never become anything else. But if you let it breathe, let it shine, it can grow into something beautiful. Nilo planted the silvery acorn behind her home, near a cluster of mossy stones. She didn't check on it every day. She didn't need to. Some things grow best when left in peace. And one night, many seasons later, she woke to a soft sound like laughter and wind, and saw a single silver leaf dancing just above the soil. Then played his flute for the first time the next morning. The melody was soft and strange, but every bird in the forest paused to listen. The keeper was never seen again. But on certain nights, when the stars blink slower than usual and the wind hums just so, some say you can hear a voice in the sky, a hum, wrapped in light. Not a warning, a song, a story that never ends. And the sky, it still has its holes. Not mistakes, not wounds, but windows. Windows to joy, to wonder, to sorrow that heals, and light that remembers. So if you ever look up and see a star that feels like it's watching back, don't be afraid. It's just the sky, breathing, and it's smiling at you.
Perfect. Here's how I made this magical